All right. We'll get back to Dr. Carson in just a bit. In the meantime, over the past several years, as we were just alluding to, it seems we have seen an increase in the amount of domestic terror attacks in the name of jihad. You had the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013, San Bernardino late last year, plus almost 11 months ago, Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz opened fire at a military recruiting center and then a reserve center in Chattanooga. 4 Marines and a sailor were killed there. Still, a lack of information, critics say, from that investigation is frustrating officials, and some of those who've been sympathetic or briefly joined Islamic terrorist groups have since changed their minds, which is kind of an interesting theory. Congressman Chuck Fleischmann from Tennessee, an area that, as we just stated, was greatly affected by that terror attack less than a year ago, wants to capitalize on that specific group. Fleischmann has won House approval for a bill that would put those former ISIS members to work fighting Islamic terrorism.
It's a propaganda tool. It's a tool that we will use disaffected members to tell audiences that might otherwise be warm to this horrible message that these people are radical, they're violent, they're bad, and they represent issues that are totally adverse to what we believe in the great United States of America.
Well, Sheriff Jim Hammond from Hamilton County, Tennessee, which covers Chattanooga, is joining us now live tonight. Sheriff, thanks for your time. You've lived through this before, obviously to a differing degree, but nonetheless, certainly a tragedy on every front. When you saw what happened in Orlando, did you instantly say this is something we should have been able to prevent because of what we saw in Chattanooga?
Well, Scott, I don't know that it's so much prevention, although I would like to think that, as it is that I don't think we've taken serious enough how to prepare for these kind of incidents. You know, I have a little different perspective because I lived for 3 years in the Middle East working with the Iraqis and seeing how radical Islam plays out. And I know how dead set the Islamic people are in terms of especially those who radicalize. And one has only to study and read the Quran to see that there is a lot of radical extremism in the Quran, and this kind of thing is bound to come out this way. As has been already stated, you may have a few number who are radicalized, but when you looked at the 1.2 to 1.4 billion Islamic people, Muslims that are in the world, that's a large number of people trying to kill you. And I think we need to really focus as a government in taking lessons from the Israelis and others in a better way of protecting our citizens.
Well, let's talk about the law enforcement side of it. What lessons do you believe that could be more easily implemented than an entire philosophical change for a country could have and should have taken place in the 11 months since that shooting in Chattanooga?
Well, we're very fortunate here in Chattanooga that we have a close-knit law enforcement family, not only with our local law enforcement, but with our state and federal agencies, and we share a great deal of information. We allow ourselves to have a great deal of training, so we feel like we're a little bit ahead of the curve in what we do here. But nobody can prepare for what we saw in Orlando yesterday unless we have much more money spent on that level of figuring out who it is that's in this country that can be bent in the direction of becoming radicalized.
Do you have a good relationship with mosques, with clerics, with religious leaders of the Muslim community in your area? Has that improved over the years?
Well, I don't know that you would say it's totally a good one. I have had dialogue with the imams and those here in the Islamic community, and as I said, most Muslims wish to live their lives and raise their family and have a good life and are not radicalized. But you've got to be able to concentrate on 2 points. Number one, rhetoric that might be coming out of the mosque that would cause the younger males especially to become radicalized. And then you have to have the Islamic community itself that does a much better job of standing up in opposition to what we're seeing happening, so that you catch these young Muslims who have a tendency, when they get disenfranchised or for whatever reason decide to revert to the teachings of the Quran and do what we saw in Orlando.
And what about, very quickly, what's happening with the investigation in Chattanooga? I understand that there's been some frustration over the fact that there's some data, some intel that still hasn't been shared. You haven't gotten the results of the investigation you're waiting for. Is that correct?
I don't know that it's so much that. There is some concern, but we've had a fairly good working relationship. But I think all along, when you have the number of agencies that we have work on this, and again, if I'm going to point any fingers at all, it would come out of Washington for their lack of being forthcoming with the information that could be shared by the FBI. I don't think you place the blame at the FBI level. I think it comes out of what Congress is allowing.
All right. Sheriff Jim Hammond, thank you so much for joining us from Chattanooga tonight. Let's get back to Orlando. Greg Angel standing by again at the scene of this weekend's tragic shooting. Greg, what do you have?